So what's new with me, I'm teaching a graphic course at Cornell. I'm teaching branding to a bunch of MBAs and engineering students. I just finished my class. It was like a 4-hour lecture/workshop. I'm glad to be off of that. What's new with you?
There's like a lot of things happening at the same time. I planned my Australia trip. I'm stopping by Tokyo, but also have a book promo here in New York on April 3rd. It's again hosted by List, but I'm also going to have another one at Shopify most likely.
Oh, wow.
So there is a lot of, parallel tracking and a lot of meetings, and it's good. Those meetings are outside of fashion, which is even better. They're in entertainment and other stuff and so on. This year really felt like, fast paced. Do you feel the same way or no?
It feels like, we just welcome 2025 and then boom, it's already March. Welcome to Hitmakers, How Brands Influence Culture, where every other week we explore cultural influence and how brands can create it.
I'm Anna Angelic. I'm a brand executive and author, and I have PhD in sociology. And we are joined by our producer, Vanya Arsenov, who every 2 weeks makes sure that we look and sound great.
And I'm Rei and I. I'm a creative entrepreneur and the founding partner of a global innovation firm called E10, based in New York, Tokyo, and Singapore.
In this episode, we're going to talk about whether tech companies can become brands. I believe so, but let's unpack this topic. Ray, you go first.
We floated this topic off and on in the past several weeks or so, and there are certain tech brands that are very much in the tech sector. And then, there are different types of tech companies that are B2C, B2B, or both. But, in the past 10, 15 years or so, the top companies, the top 5 to 7 most influential companies in the world are one way or another tech companies, starting with the likes of Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, and then more recently in the last few years, companies like Nvidia, right? And they essentially, I think they're called the Magnificent Seven. They take up an enormous portion of the market, not just in the US, but around the world. Mm-hmm. So they obviously have influence one way or another, but at the same, they're companies like Apple that I've been a fanboy of for a long time. I've been a Mac user since, I graduated, even in college, I think. And I've sort of flirted with, Android and non-Mac products, but I've always come back to it. And Apple is sort of the symbolic tech brand that has managed to become a brand. But I question the same kind of, whether I or people have the same kind of connection or identity with a tech brand with, let's say, Google or with Amazon or so forth. So the natural question was, what makes a tech company or tech brand, a tech product, a brand? Everything, every company is a brand one way or another, but there's like a degree of brand in each of the companies. And I would argue that companies like a company like Apple has a stronger brand that lets people identify with the Apple brand and an Apple products versus, say, a Google or Microsoft or even Amazon and those tech companies.
Why do you think that is, in your opinion? Why do you think that is?
Say in the past, right? Apple was a very active marketer, and they spend a lot of effort and money on marketing. But, and then, more recently, I think they do, but I think they've always been very focused on the quality of the product and the quality of the overall experience, not just the physical aspect of it, but the software, the user experience, the UI, UX, the experiential aspect of it. And then I think another thing that they've managed to do in terms of how they show up in the world is the success of the Apple stores and how that's become part of the experience as well. Apple store, people might not be going there every week, but I mean, every Apple store is always filled with customers. Some of them might be buying products and some of them might be just hanging out. So I think they've been able to not only focus on the quality of the individual products, but also being able to and being disciplined in curating a seamless experience from one product to the next product, all the way to say the store. Mm-hmm. So it feels very cohesive, the whole brand experience. Whereas I think a lot of other companies, that cohesion, I don't see with, let's say, like with say Microsoft or Google to some extent in terms of like, using tools, but they don't necessarily have the physical presence, the same level of physical presence that Apple has. Yeah. So I think that the curation of customer touch points, quality, and the seamlessness.
I think that's great, but that's all execution, Ray. You know what I mean? That's like, I think what Apple has is a myth. It's a myth. It's a myth of the founder who is a pirate. Don't join the army, be a pirate.
Do you think that they still that?
Originally, 1,000%, because it's kind of like a guy who is dropping acid, who is kicked out of his own company, who is quoted to this day, the myth of the founder. This is like literally like the stores where I say it's tactics. Yeah, this is all great, but that's table stakes. That's imitable. Like Samsung imitated those stores and so on. Yeah. Originally, however, no one had that insanity in terms of a founder who is like, do you want to sell like sugar water? Or do you want to change the world? Yeah, and people identify with found like with myth making figures. So it was almost like religion. Now I'm not talking about now. I'm talking a generation ago. Like
in
terms of execution, absolutely, that's a great brand execution. Yeah. No, to like the packaging, the smell, the everything. Yeah. But that's all. Other brands can imitate that, and they do imitate that. Yeah. What made Apple different is like Bill Gates doesn't have that story.
On that myth, right? I agree. In the like my generation, our generation, and maybe slightly younger, but our generation grew up with that myth and seeing Steve Jobs, come back to Apple and then rebuild what was a dying company, dying brand, and between 1999, 2000-ish, all the way till when he passed away for a decade and a half or so. I think he was instrumental in not only driving the business, but creating the myth. And he was the myth, right? So I agree with you, like with with our generation, but like say somebody who's, 25 years old, who didn't grow up with that. Do you think they buy into Apple because of the myth?
It doesn't need to be conscious. All brands are stories. So in a sense, they are encountering Steve Jobs. They're encountering his quotes. They're encountering the design. Of course, if TikTok generation, they know they're buying Apple computers. They know it's your perception that one brand is cooler than the other. Why? You don't know.
Yeah.
Well, why are kids still buying Apple more than Samsung in the US? No idea. It can be the myth, but it's certainly not because the store looks great. And it's certainly not because of the 1984 advertising.
Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not.
So you know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of like all of that sort of helps. But again, that's all execution. And if Apple tomorrow really changes that, and look, what I do think is that myth needs to be perpetuated and so on. Apple hasn't innovated in forever. They make money on us losing your AirPods. Like that case costs like $100, and like they so in a sense they're not the same company. However, it takes like more than one generation for that myth to die down. Because look at like car brands, for example, is you still when you hear Ford Motor Company, or when you still hear Coca-Cola, even though you don't drink Coca-Cola at all, it means something. And that's the power of the brand. And that's all I'm trying to say is the power of the brand is that story, that myth at the beginning, because no one remembers Coca-Cola like heartwarming ads from 20 years ago. But it's
Yeah, yeah.
one thing builds upon the other in culture.
Do you think, going back to the tech company being a brand, Apple, other than the myth of the founder, what do you think is making Apple such a strong brand then?
But it's not just the myth of the founder, it's that positioning which is going against the grain, being a pirate. That's an outcast brand. And people root for outcast brands. These are those that disrupt the status quo. So when you look at the brand archetypes, you have those who are, again, pirates, who are fighting against the established rules and norms and state of affairs. And people root by that. That was Apple's original positioning. For whatever reason, they're still coasting on it 20 years later.
Yeah, because I mean, the Think Different ad, that came out 25 years ago. And millions of people may have watched it back then, but millions, if not billions of people have no idea that was the positioning, right? But what do you think? What do you think is keeping that myth alive one way or another?
But I don't know if anything is keeping the myth alive. I don't think so. I think what myth lives through that original execution. That's what I'm saying. Is like Johnny Ive left. That revolutionary design, the revolutionary interface, the UX, everything you talked about. That's from generation ago. That's from 25 years ago. Now they're making money. Now they're coasting on that. There has not been a significant innovation in Apple since, I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, Apple Watch probably was the last.
I don't even remember. That is it's more than 10 years. It's probably 15 years. But it's not enough. It's a short time. It's, so they'll be able to coast for a really long time. And it's not like that innovation happened anywhere else, that groundbreaking innovation. It was like Microsoft and Apple had personal computers. Then Steve Jobs revolutionized the mobile device in a sense, not so much with iPad, more with an iPhone. And that was the groundbreaking innovation that is completely reorganized how people use. So that's number one. Nothing happened since then, no matter where from. Huawei, Samsung, forget it. They have better cameras. Okay, great. You know what I mean? So now it's incremental innovation. That innovation is also what the brand is. That comes from that pirate positioning.
I see what you're saying. And I agree with what you're saying to an extent, especially for people who have seen the aspect of Apple that was the pirate, the Think Different challenger positioning that they had 20, almost 25 years ago. What I would question is, and I guess what I was saying earlier about the execution of the brand and what's kept the brand at that level of brand equity is that like they've been able to execute at a pretty high level. Their quality. I mean, to be honest, the quality of the products have slipped a little bit, and like you said, the innovation. We haven't seen groundbreaking innovation in the past 10, 15 years, if not more. But the execution of the curation of the product experience has been at a high level, at high quality, that I think the execution has kind of carried the brand over the past 10 years. Because I don't think there's been any new myth that's created.
No, but that's saying they're coasting, and however they want to coast, that they haven't changed the Apple stores, they haven't changed anything. So I think we are agreeing. I don't understand your point.
No, because you said, it's just execution. But what I'm saying is that
there is no ingenuity in that execution. It used to be when it was groundbreaking and new, but now it's just incremental innovation. iPhone with the camera, stores look the same they looked 15 years ago. There is no innovation there. So I don't understand why you it's.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, I think what I'm saying is that the level of execution is quite high, is very high, even though it's sequential and incremental. Like there hasn't been new groundbreaking innovation, but they are coasting at a quality that's quite high to differentiate. So what I'm disagreeing is that I don't think other brands are able to execute at that level. And that's what keeps.
I don't agree. Look at Google, look at Amazon, look at Samsung.
But do you think, okay. So on that point though, like, do you think Amazon or Google has the same cachet as a brand as Apple does?
No, but they don't have a mid. That's what I'm telling you. But Amazon is delivering everything today or tomorrow. The customer convenience is their core brand promise. They're doing it impeccably.
Yeah. So I guess again, I'm trying to unpack this topic, right? Like, how can a tech company become a brand? So you're saying that Apple is a strong brand because of the myth and the previous innovation.
I say differentiated brand. It's a differentiated brand because of the myth. Strength of its brand is a number of factors. It's sales, it's products, it's experience, it's so on. It's $1 trillion brand.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most valuable brand.
What I'm saying, I don't know if people are buying Apple as they did before because it was different than Microsoft. If you bought a Mac product, you signal that you're more creative than Suits. Who buy Microsoft. So that meant something. That was the strength of the brand. Now you buy those products out of habit, convenience, everyone else has it, so on. I'm not buying these products because I just don't want to deal with like comparing like phones or whatever. I don't want to deal. I don't know if some other computer is better. They're probably the same at this point.
Oh, okay. So you're buying just out of convenience, not because you identify.
No, exactly. Like I cannot, like I don't think it's cool. It's just there. It's utility.
Yeah. But again, like, you're buying it purely out of convenience, not because Apple product or Apple laptop is better than a Microsoft.
I'm buying it because I'm used to buy. I'm being a loyal customer.
Yeah. And then the execution of the user experience hasn't been so bad that it hasn't made you switch to something else.
Well, it hasn't been bad, but it hasn't been great. I mean, it's been like, I don't care about it. That's not my, it's not going to decide, oh, that's definitely, I'm going to buy it because I'm going to get it the same afternoon. That's not my decision-making factor. Decision-making factor is all my stuff is on iCloud. I'm locked in. Switching costs are too high at this point.
Right.
Like when I buy new stuff, it's all automatic. Like all my data is there. Why would I deal with anything else? That's how they're making money today. And I do think that it's nice that they have the genius, but I don't disagree that the execution is important. But I'm trying to distinguish what is easy to imitate, what is not easy to imitate.
I think where our disagreement might be that I don't think execution is actually that easy to imitate.
You don't think that genius bar can be replicated?
No, I think it can be like in points, but like the holistic, integration of they do everything at a fairly high level, and I don't see it.
In Europe, in Samsung stores, is the same.
But again, I'm not talking about just the store. I'm talking about the store, the UI, the service, and everything.
The interface is great. The phones are great. Samsung is more popular in Europe than iPhone. So that's what I'm saying. It's also like you do have that seamlessness on that level as well.
Mm-hmm.
People who love Android, they just have the same lock-in and same switching cost dilemma as we do here.
So I've actually switched to a Samsung phone. This is 5 or 6 years ago, just as a way to experiment. Is this a better product or better experience? And I found, and again, this was 5 or 6 years ago, so it's been a little while, but I found the experience to be so disjointed and so frustrating. And maybe because I was so used to the Apple universe that I came back. And on top of that, I would say, and this might sound shallow, but little things like green bubble versus the blue bubble.
You're a designer, Ray. You're a designer.
I know, but so I guess where I'm disagreeing with you is that, I mean, at least from what I'm gathering in terms of what you're saying, that the executions are easy to imitate, but myth you cannot, is what you're saying.
Well, the origin story you can't.
The origin story, of course,
Every
yeah.
brand has an origin story or doesn't, and
Yeah.
some of them hit culture. Some of them really resonate emotionally with people and with those archetypes that we love in terms of narratives and storytelling.
Yeah.
And then I don't think, like, look, obviously Apple creates a fantastic ecosystem. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that if they had that without Steve Jobs, without the origin story, without Be a Pirate, without insane innovation, no one
In the
has
past, yeah.
seen interactive interface
Yeah.
before iPhone. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating, of course, they were, but in terms of like that completely, they killed feature phones completely.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that
Yes.
is not that's what builds the brand. And then wonderful execution obviously is important. If this
Yeah.
was, if like even Apple computers, they last 2 years now tops because battery dies, because that's designed obsolescence.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to keep buying. Even that is not enough to piss me off. What I'm saying, it's not ideal. You change, like, look, my phone is all like, like you change your phones every year. You change. That's not. They want you to buy more. So, like,
Yeah.
in a sense, this is not a perfect product. This is not a superior product.
But so on that point though, like, are you using Apple products purely out of avoiding the pain of switching to a different ecosystem, or is there another reason, perception reason that you think you're influenced to hang on to iPhone?
So I don't think it will, like, if I live here, if I lived in Europe, I would probably do Samsung or something. Like it's kind of like the cameras are really amazing on Samsung.
Yeah.
Well, know. And because they're everywhere and they advertise to you, so I'm exposed to like being marketed to. Here, I simply don't pay attention because the other thing, it's not important to me. Once,
It's not important to you.
having an iPhone was a status symbol.
Yes.
Versus, in the first generation set, and then having a new iPhone was a status symbol. And then having a unique drop in a specific color, metallic or gold or whatnot, was a status symbol. But now we are past all of that. Now it's utility. I don't buy it as a status symbol. I buy it as utility. No one is going to ask me, oh, you have a new iPhone. Yeah. No one. Not me. I don't think that anyone is asking anyone, oh, you have a new iPhone now.
Well, because I mean, like, we had like up to iPhone 16, there's 16 different versions, and then, 16 this and 16 that. So like there's probably like, 50 different versions of the iPhone. So a new iPhone, I mean, everyone has a new iPhone one way or another.
Well, right. But that's what I'm saying. That's what you asked me. Like, does that influence my thinking? No, honestly, it's just pure convenience because I know when I buy a new one, like I'll just switch it off, I'll connect it, and it's gonna be the same. I'm not gonna think about it.
Do you think then, projecting out, let's say 10 years from now, that like if Apple became a pure utility player, doesn't that make them more vulnerable in terms of a Samsung or somebody else not completely taking over, but at least taking away their business?
I think that already happened.
You think so? I guess, to some extent, yeah.
I mean, with Samsung, with Huawei, like there was a moment, probably not 10 years, but at least 5 years or something, when they cleaned the house completely. And then they were like, oh, Samsung made it, Huawei made it. And, in different markets, Apple is not number one. Like iPhone is not number one, or Apple products are not number one. That already happened.
What company, what tech company do you think, outside of, say, Apple or Samsung, what tech company do you think has a strong brand?
Well, I do think there are like a lot of smaller ones, and then we can talk about, because I recently wrote about mascots and toys. So you see, like, remember back in the day, there was Ask Jeeves search engine.
Oh, man.
I remember that.
Oh, and my
it was
God,
like, it was almost ChatGPT before ChatGPT was like invented. I mean, reason people didn't use it because it was a horrible search engine. Because it tried to combine like human curation with, and then Google was like, get out of the way. Our algorithm is better than yours, So, but that was kind of a way to kind of humanize the brand. So I do think like that MailChimp Again, they're like those brands that are trying to, like Duolingo. You have Mailchimp. You have like Slack to an extent. You have Hootsuite. Like they have like those little mascots that assume the
Like
lives of the
characters.
phone.
Yeah, characters. Yeah.
And they use those mascots to live in the world. But then, in a sense, that brand character, brand image is separate from the utility. However, by the sheer emotional association, this is very different than what you said about how Apple built a brand through experience. They're building a brand. They are trying to tell a story through a character. And the product has almost nothing to do with that character.
Right.
Which is very different. You're saying, but the products are amazing. I like the little green button. I like the store experience. I like integration. Here it doesn't matter. Here it's all about, the character is funny.
Yeah, almost the humor, the fantasy of the
So you're telling the story through a character and the world that's built around that character and tone of voice and personality. It's completely different way of brand building.
Yeah. Duolingo is an interesting one. I mean, we talked about this, I think a couple of episodes ago, because it's one of the few it is a tech brand, but in the past couple of years or so, they've been able to create, I wouldn't say necessarily a dent, but at least people pay attention to them. Beyond the tactical, practical learning aspect of a language. Yeah. And then the character is a useful device to sort of, have fun with it, I guess. Yeah. So you mentioned Duolingo, you mentioned the Mailchimp, Ask Jeeps from 25 years ago.
Mailchimp, but they're still going strong. They're still, into that. There is also Slack. But Slack has more or less, they do have like UX and little design kind of details and tone of voice. But again, this is all kind of you penetrate culture. Like, for example, what Duolingo did with their ads, with the Super Bowl ad, with the TikTok videos, through that humor of the character, and that's how you compete. But like, I'll give you another example. OpenAI had this Super Bowl ad, and it's so vague, and that's a mistake because uses of AI are all, the promise of AI is also super vague right now in particular user scenarios. People are not sure, like where is it going to take them, how to use it. There's specific use scenarios, but the promise is much bigger than that. And when you have a vague product, vague experience, and a vague ad, doesn't help you.
Yeah, it was very vague. Yeah.
It
was quite lofty. It wasn't specific, and it wasn't. I mean, I know the people who works on it, so I want to be respectful. But it was.
Tell us what you really think.
No. Again, I want to be respectful to the people that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, forget about the actual product. I'm just saying, like, you have to have a very specific promise, because again, if you go to the execution, what the consistent experience, you have a certain expectation, So if that expectation, if you're setting vague expectations, then delivery is, the same.
Yeah. Do you think tools and platforms like Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, are those brands, or are we just using them just because of convenience and sheer scale?
Well, Meta is definitely like a sort of a villain right now.
Yes.
And it's been for a long time. It's been a long time due to execution of hate speech, of lack of moderation in comments, of like an algorithm of basically popping up, like creating bubbles, polarization, and so on. So that's, again, the user experience, the execution of the promise, connect all the people in the world, whatever his promise was horrible, is horrible. It's not good for human society, for human brain, for interaction psychology, and so on. So in that sense, you have like evil brands, But again, it's based on the actual experience of the brand, and then on the founder being like who he is,
Yeah, I guess his myth is, is a lot of masculine energy.
A lot of masculine energy these days, But he never had his founding story, as told in Social Network, was that he stole from. Like, that's your founding story. What else?
Right.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah, it's not a very good myth. I mean, it's a myth, but it's not a good myth to have.
Well, it's but then
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
also you're not like this memorable character. It's not a myth really. You're not a mythical figure. People are gonna forget about you, like
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
in a sense.
Speaking of a character, a tech brand character, the one that I wouldn't have expected this company to have this much clout is Nvidia. Yeah, because Nvidia, like, I mean, they've been around for 20 years or something, and they were just making chips, these computer graphic chips. And people don't care about chips. But in the recent few years, really the last 4 years, 3, 4 years, they've been able to consume so much of the attention of the business tech world. And part of it is the founder being quite visible. He's got a look. He wears a leather jacket, and he's probably not as charismatic or as known as Elon Musk or even Jeff Bezos, but he's one of the more visible CEOs who, by the way, seems to be decent. I don't know about him much about him, but I think that his presence is definitely more visible than a lot of other tech CEOs. And for something as mundane and as boring as a computer chip or Nvidia, and even the name of the company is kind of hard to pronounce, and you don't really know how to read it when you first see it. But it's interesting how they've been able to gain so much attention in the past couple of years.
Well, I don't think that's because of chips. I think it's because of artificial intelligence, and again, a myth making around. This is the craps for artificial.
No. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not. It's very little to do with like the functionality or like the feature of the chips that they're making, but it's they've been able to ride the AI conversation. They used to be a computer graphics chip maker,
Yeah.
and then when AI came, they've been able to position that they became the AI chip maker. What used to be a computer graphics chip maker, and on top of that, I think having a CEO who seems to be more
no, I just think they're at the right time at the right place without competition. That's it.
Yeah.
Because the narrative around artificial intelligence is such, and no one else. I mean, their story is again a story of an underdog who becomes a top dog. Because Intel, the biggest chip maker in the world, was upset by a pirate again, or by an outlaw, by an underdog. And that is again the narrative that resonates really well. Who is this Nvidia company? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it helps to have a good founder.
Yeah. And I think in their case, I think they were probably lucky. I don't think they were strategic about it.
That's what I'm saying. Right place, right time, right narrative.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
But good for them. They're like whatever their stock.
Yeah.
Price.
And it just so happens that the other chip maker, they were the king, and they just didn't get into the field. And then Nvidia just ate that piece of the pie, and then that pie became so much bigger than the rest of the pie.
Well, right, but they were that underdog that recognized the opportunity, and Intel. This is like always David versus Goliath story, and that's why the recent Chinese one was also people love the underdog stories. People root for underdogs.
Yeah.
So whenever you have one, count on people supporting them. It's just the way it is.
Just to summarize it, the story of an underdog is a powerful device. Whether it's a computer brand or a chip brand or fashion brand or whatever, or like this Chinese brand, that company that nobody had heard of, but it was one company, one small AI company that came out of nowhere, and they had good enough product, at least for the short term, that it was good enough to capture enough audience to. I mean, they were for several weeks. They were the number one downloaded app in the App Store. So be an underdog and seize the moment. That would be my summary.
Cool. All right. Cool. What are your hits?
My hit, so completely unrelated to the conversation that we just had. Two things. And this is very sort of industry insider speak. So, half of the people who might listen to this podcast might not know what I'm talking about. And it's very within the context of the creative advertising industry. So BBDO, one of the long-standing traditional agencies, just recently repositioned themselves, or at least the way they present themselves. They are still an advertising agency, but they came up with this positioning that says do big things. And they sort of, had a visual campaign to go along with it. They changed their website. They created these, assets for social media. And I didn't think much of it, to be completely honest, at first. But what I'm sort of intrigued by is I've never seen an ad agency employee, a group of ad agency employees being enthusiastic about the rebrand of their company to the extent that the BBDO people might be right now. And like I saw around me, and because I'm in that sector, I see quite a bit of it. And it's the first time in a long time that there's quite a bit of hype around it. Now, it may be a hype, it may be gone soon, but it was unusual that an agency repositioning effort I've heard as much as I did about this one in the recent past.
I didn't hear a damn thing about. I didn't think about BBDO.
No, again, like I think it's a very sort of like secluded thing, in my bubble. Yeah, and like now we all live in different bubbles, right? And you have your bubble, I have my bubble, and those bubbles might not intersect with each other. But yeah, I guess sort of the larger point.
Why is that interesting? Why is it interesting that an agency repositions itself at a time where agencies are dying and they need to do something to survive? They're getting scaled down. So I think this is just like they're like hyping themselves up. Why is that interesting to you? I don't understand.
No, so it was interesting exactly for that reason, meaning that I didn't think much of it when I saw it, but I saw people talking about it unexpectedly. And
people who work at BBDO or others?
Around others as well, at least in my bubble. And is that because some, people are resonating with it, or is it because it's kind of like a little blip in, to your point, in an industry that's struggling and, trying to, is it an underdog story?
Well, I'm really happy for them because there is so little fun things happening in advertising industry that if this is not exciting, then
it was unusual. Like at this time I found it unusual.
Cool. My hit would be that I've seen like a lot more, maybe I'm biased, but like on Monday, there was a Burberry, an iconic brand that brought back its symbol of a knight. And they literally used it in their campaign. They use it on their fashion show. So what I'm thinking is, thanks to AI, that the modern cultural expression is going towards more real and imaginary combining. And that is exactly the result of sort of bubbles and of the fact that, like, I don't think that anymore the time, how in the time there is future, there is present, there is past, and there is always progress. And I just think that this gigantic flattening, there is chronological flattening with archive reissues, with like bringing back movie sequels, movie reboots, movie sort of franchises, and then also redoing a lot of things from the past really upsets that chronology. So all of a sudden you have, I don't know, Ghostbusters from like 2 years ago is the Ghostbusters from 40 years ago. They're in the same sort of level.
Exactly, yeah.
Or what you have in terms of, give me an example. What would be an example of a movie that's going to be this summer that is a reboot or of something that happened before? Sequel, prequel, no matter.
Gosh, I can't think of any specific one, but I'm sure.
See, you're sure there are many. There are either prequels or sequels or reboots. So in that sense, that's kind of that insanity that I think that we're all operating, not because of nostalgia or anything else. That's just a marketing ploy at this point. But I think it's the creative expression just uses a much wider range of tools, in a sense that you can have, like, you take stuff from imagination, like, like the knight. The knight is very connected to what we talked about, like Duolingo mascot. You have a Burberry knight, jostling knight from 50 years ago that's all of a sudden came to life. And then you have people taking photos with it at the fashion show. You have it in the ad. So I think it's a lot of that kind of like Lego sets for adults. I think it's a lot of that imagination, that game, that play that is now getting more into our storytelling. So
I know the knight mascot or the knight symbol, the recent sort of incarnation or the revival of the knight or animating, making it move, that didn't intersect into my world or into my bubble. I haven't seen it. So I'll definitely look it up. But
look it up. But you've seen Elmo and On. You've seen that.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing. All of a sudden, you have a character that is imagined character from coming in and telling a story. And like, soft touch, be soft on yourself. Roger Federer, you don't know how. That's the same thing. Forget about your like.
But are you talking about like something that exists in different times, coexisting in the same time, or are you talking about something that's imaginary versus something that's real coexisting? You're talking about both.
The operating system is imaginary. So now Federer is sitting with Elmo, and Elmo goes on a podcast, and Elmo goes and tells runners, "Why don't you go easy on yourselves?"
Right.
It's a cartoon character from childhood that's like, and I just think it's kind of like showing a trend towards mascots and imaginary things being influencers because they can't be canceled, they don't get old. That is the reason of that cultural expression is widening up. They're taking things from our childhoods because of that time compression. I wonder if you're gonna see more of that. That's what I think.
I wonder if that trend will expand beyond what we see now. Okay, I'll pay attention to that. Yeah,
just pay attention. It doesn't need to be forget about fashion, but like I think
sure.
especially with their Super Bowl ad, and they really double down on Elmo because Elmo went on a podcast, like they had a follow up, and I don't think they're gonna let that one really go. And I think we're gonna see more because you see, like we had the Barbie movie. We're having, I don't know, I think 13 new movies are in development from Mattel. So I think toys are among us because with AI, real, what's not real. Anything is real. So pay attention. You'll see more of that.
Yeah, characters and mascots or toys and mascots in real world. Imaginary friends.
Imaginary friends like Duolingo, like they're probably going to bring it in the real world with like AI or not AI. I don't know.
Probably. Cool. All right. Shall we wrap up?
Thanks everyone for listening. And thanks, Ray, for being such an amazing sparring partner.
That's right. Even though we have disagreements. I love it.
We have to. It would be so boring without. I don't know anyone I would rather have disagreements with because I always learn something.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. All right. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, everyone.